Welcome to the Vibe Within podcast. I'm your host, Gab Cohen. Each week, we will connect through stories and conversations about wellness, yoga, addictions, spirituality, mental health, rituals, and everything in between. The goal is to transform our traumas into strengths to create the change we desire in our lives. My mission is to help others by shining awareness on real-life topics so we can learn new ways to heal physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Whatever you are going through in this moment, you are not alone, so let's connect and heal our vibe within. Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host, Gab Cohen, and today's topic is really vulnerable for me to share in general about. I figured this is the perfect time to release this episode because I am all about being completely real with where we're at in our healing journey. Because on Instagram and on blogs, sometimes the only thing that people are sharing is how they've overcome blank, like how you've overcame your addiction, or how you've overcame your eating disorder or your codependency issues, and how that's in the past now, and how, everything's different now because you've recovered or you've gotten through it. When I want to just say that could be your reality, that could be the reality of many people, getting through it, pulling up by your bootstraps, and just, not looking back. But the truth of the matter is, recovery and healing is not linear. And this podcast is the only pure channel that I have to communicate with, my community or followers or listeners, because Instagram only takes me so far. Instagram is just videos, pictures, and text. And we can get so lost in comparing our healing journeys to other people's healing journeys. And we can say, well, why is it so easy for them to, get through those toxic behaviors, or that addiction, or disordered eating, or whatever it is. And the truth is that, it's really challenging to share, hey, this is the stuff that I'm still struggling with today. It's a lot easier to share a post saying, this is what I used to struggle with, because used to puts you in this realm of not anymore. I got over it, I overcame it, and now I'm better, and now I'm not needing to use those behaviors. So what I'm trying to say is that I'm using this podcast as a real-time channel and tool to share with you guys what I'm actually going through in my healing journey. And I want to say that it is an up and down process, because if we sit ourselves down and you ask yourself like, what are some of the toxic behaviors that I have let go of since last year, or 2 years ago, or 3 years ago, or even 10 years ago? You can sit down and make a huge list of victories that you have created in your life. But the same side of that coin can also represent, well, I'm dealing with these health issues now, or, I've relapsed in these little ways. We're always dancing, we're always dancing with whatever it is that we are wrestling with, whether it's addiction, codependency, relationship issues, substance abuse, eating disorders, body image, body dysmorphia, trauma, whatever it is that you're dealing with. It's a constant dance, and it's not going to be the same each week, each month. I definitely am a believer in astrology, so I like to always check in with what's going on in astrology, because that kind of sets the table and sets the stage as far as like, okay, what are the energies, what are the issues that might come up, what are the transits that are happening. And I get a lot of my information from Jessica Laniato's podcast, Ghost of a Podcast. So what I'll do is I'll check in with that podcast, and everything that she says, threads itself in with mental health and, emotional well-being. And a lot of the transits that happen can bring up different topics and different issues. Some transits are very body related or physical related. Some transits are very home and family trauma related. Some transits are very like depression and anxiety related. So it's always interesting to see how that kind of aligns and correlates in your life. So recently, the last, year or so, I really have been taking my recovery seriously with my disordered eating and then, substance abuse, as I have shared a lot about on this podcast. Now I'm sober, and healing all sorts of trauma, like sexual trauma and relationship trauma and all the layers of trauma that can come about. And I think that drinking and partying and doing drugs definitely had a layering effect, if you will, to my trauma. Now, getting into the topic of today's episode, it is atypical anorexia. And a lot of people might hear that term and say, atypical, that's such a fucked up word. And I actually agree. I do not like that this is a clinical term in the eating disorder realm, because atypical, like the word atypical, is just not like that fun of a word in general. But me and Erin dive deep into this topic, and it is explained beautifully, and this is what I'm going through right now in my journey. So our bodies are a very, very fragile vessel, but also strong and resilient at the same time, I must say. And through the years of my alcohol, drug use, trauma, all the shit, it has left me with some health issues, hypothyroidism, Hashimoto, chronic illness, autoimmune stuff that is just ongoing. And when you're stuck in that realm of healing a physical, disease, chronic illness, and you're on the journey of healing mental health and mental illness stuff like eating disorders or, depression or severe anxiety or whatever it is that you're going through, healing the physical and the mental at the same time can become a full-time job. And I feel like my life has become, just a full-time job of emailing, experts, emailing clinicians, emailing dietitians, trying to find the proper care and proper support that I need right now in my journey. Especially in the United States, it's really challenging because of insurance and how, insurance doesn't cover a lot, which is really just driving me insane. But what I am trying to get to right now is just like a happy medium and like a happy balance of healing the physical and healing the emotional. And it's almost like I've lost myself in the process, which is why I just, recorded that whole episode on overdosing on shadow work. So if you haven't listened to that one, go back an episode and listen to the most previous episode. You graduated from shadow work school, because basically when you're in the trenches and in the deep end of healing emotionally and physically, your world becomes consumed with that. And this is what I'm going through right now. I would, I'm feeling very, very vulnerable and uncomfortable right now, actually, sharing this intro, because atypical anorexia is not something that people talk about, because it's almost an embarrassment, like, because people don't understand that atypical anorexia is just as bad as anorexia. So over the years, like I was saying, of drugs, alcohol, all the abuse and self-destruction that I did to my body, my hormones got fucked up, my digestion got fucked up, my metabolism got fucked up. So if you've ever heard of the term, starvation mode or permanent metabolic damage, a lot of fitness and health experts actually say that there's no such thing as starvation mode. But I feel like a lot of them haven't really understood the term atypical anorexia, which is you can live in a larger body and you can still starve yourself, and you can still be in a larger or normal weight body and not, quote unquote, look like you have anorexia. Now, what's been really getting to me recently is that people like to say, "Oh, well, that's impossible. If you're restricting and you're starving yourself, then you're gonna lose weight, and you're gonna get thin, and you're gonna get skinny and whatever." Well, atypical anorexia kind of debunks that myth, and it has to do with hormones and the endocrine system and permanent metabolic damage and chronic illness, and especially Hashimoto and thyroid. Your body starts to grind down, and it can adjust to eating very little. And what's come to be in my life is that I've gone so far down the health conscious, healing, the Hashimoto, and the thyroid stuff that I realized that I'm limiting myself to very little foods because I'm deathly afraid of a Hashimoto flare-up, which I've talked about before on the podcast. Hashimoto flare-ups are so uncomfortable. It's like just imagine inflammation in your whole body, swelling, water weight, puffiness, bloating, sometimes diarrhea or constipation, just overall fatigue, and it's just terrible. So I've been, really, really careful with what I'm eating, and it's gotten to the point where I've realized, wow, I'm restricting myself quite a bit. And this is why I had Erin come on the podcast, because chances are someone in your life is dealing with an eating disorder, and someone in your life who's close to you can have atypical anorexia, because they might not look like they have anorexia, but they are dealing with issues with food and body and restricting themselves or starving themselves or just doing something that is not making them feel good in their body. So I'm going to read some statistics real quick before we get into the episode. It says, according to a study conducted by what is this? Recovery Village? I don't know. 20% of youth with eating disorders may have atypical anorexia. We get into the definition of this, so just listen to the episode, and I'm going to read some other eating disorder statistics real quick. And this is from the Eating Disorder Recovery Center, or Eating Recovery Center, eatingrecoverycenter.com. It says, the latest statistics indicate that more than 30 million people in the U.S. will suffer from an eating disorder, and 10 million of those individuals are men. 13% of women over the age of 50 have symptoms of an eating disorder. This is the highest mortality rate, so eating disorders have the highest mortality rate of any mental illness, with nearly one person dying every hour as a result of an eating disorder. Sufferers aren't always underweight. About 35% of binge eating disorder and 30% of bulimia patients are medically obese. It's the third most chronic illness. Anorexia is the third most common chronic illness among adolescents. And yes, I mean, eating disorders are definitely known to develop in early stage, early adolescence. So, 10 to 15 years old. It's getting to the point where I feel like everyone has some kind of weird issue with food or body. And it might not be a full blown eating disorder. I'm not saying that. But I do think that in this day and age with social media and comparing our bodies and comparing our workouts and comparing what everyone's eating in a day with those what I eat in a day posts, it is a very comparative, toxic world out there. And if you are trying to recover from a physical illness, a mental illness, anything body related, it can intertwine with food. It can intertwine with what you can eat, what you can't eat, especially if you're dealing with physical chronic illnesses, because you have to be more careful with what you eat. So it makes you kind of hyper focused on what you're putting in your body and how you feel, and it can become very, very intense. And I know that I'm not the only one struggling with this, and that's why I'm putting this out there. I think more people need to start talking about atypical anorexia, because I see a lot of people on Instagram talking about recovering from binge eating and recovering from bulimia, because for some reason binge eating and bulimia is like very intertwined with shame and guilt and disgust and like overindulgence and a lack of control and whatever. And then on the other side of that coin, anorexia is looked at as this vain disease that is just, the people who have anorexia are like are narcissists or vain or obsessed with looks and obsessed with being in control, which I gotta tell you, is not usually the case. If you haven't listened to my episode from back in the summer, I wanna say it was in August. There's a couple episodes where I dive deep into my journey with eating disorders and binge eating and recovering from binge eating, and then there's one about body dysmorphia. So I will try to remember to link those in the show notes, but if you just Google like the vibe within body dysmorphia or the vibe within binge eating, overcoming binge eating, those two episodes will come up, and I dive really, really deep into my experience and my journey of over 15 years of disordered eating and body dysmorphia and the waves and the ebbs and flows of eating disorders and what they can feel like and all that. But this is something that people aren't talking about because it's so misunderstood. Like, you don't have to be in a super skinny body to be sick or to deserve the treatment that you need. You don't need to be in a super skinny body to be taken seriously. Sometimes the people in the gym who look very in shape and very healthy and toned and perfect bodies, they could be binging and purging. You have no idea. They could be engaging in like the most toxic eating habits. And I'm putting myself on blast right now because recovery is not linear. And when you see somebody in the recovery space only talking about how I used to do that and I used to do this, it's like, well, there's got to be something that you're still doing that you're not happy about, or there's got to be little glimpses of relapse here and there, because eating disorders, in my opinion, are one of those things that are never fully recovered. You can be weight restored and you can be recovered, but it's still there. Just like addiction, if you're a full-blown addict, you could be clean from that drug for 13 years, but you still have those urges from time to time. So people who are in recovery for eating disorders, they will still have those thoughts, those distorted thoughts or behaviors or triggers or, distorted ways of seeing yourself or urges, like all these things are normal. So I'm here to tell you that with whatever journey you're healing from, whether it's addiction or sex addiction or relationships or eating disorders, it's not linear. And it is really healthy to write down lists of things that you've overcome and things that you've gotten through, and then things that you are, trying to release, toxic behaviors that are no longer serving you, and how you can swap those out. I know it's easier said than done, but I think part of healing and part of really getting through those hurdles and those ruts and plateaus of recovery of any kind is speaking it out, getting support, getting a therapist, getting specialists who you can talk to a friend, right? Like support is the main thing that's going to help everybody heal and recover, which is why I have been emailing and texting, I want to say like 50 specialists in the last few days, just sending tons of emails to people like, hey, I'm looking for this. This is my price range. I'm really struggling, blah, blah, blah. So that's my spiel. I know this was kind of a long intro, but I just wanted to update you with what I am going through. You know, living with chronic illness and metabolic damage and trauma to the body and atypical anorexia is not fun at all. So if you are struggling with this, you're not alone. Feel free to reach out to me. Feel free to reach out to Erin. She's awesome. I'm putting all of her info in the show notes. She actually works out of the University of Denver, and all of her work is atypical anorexia based. So someone in your life, close to you, could be dealing with an eating disorder. They could look normal on the outside, and they could be not normal on the inside. So just keep that into consideration. And if you think that you're dealing with some kind of eating disorder or disordered eating, there's tons of resources out there. There's free support groups out there. ANAD is one of them. The Eating Disorder Foundation is another. They usually pop up right away when you do a Google search. So my heart's with you. If you are struggling with this, you're not alone. I'm definitely struggling, and it's super, super frustrating because, sometimes you can feel very stuck, and it's crazy to have this illness because it goes against a lot of like the biological science of reality, which is when you restrict, you lose weight and you become skinny, and that goes against science, right? Because with atypical anorexia, you can be restricting, even if it's unintentional, and you can maintain your weight or gain weight. And a lot of it does have to do with, for me at least, it has to do with hormones and digestion and Hashimoto and chronic illness, which can really, really damage your entire endocrine system and your metabolism. So that's my spiel. I'm sharing this because I'm getting to the point where I'm just tired of suffering in silence. So if anybody is struggling with this, feel free to reach out to me, email me, or just DM me. So without further ado, let's get into this episode with Erin. I think you're going to love her. She's awesome. We get super deep, and we get kind of spiritual and wooey as well, which I love. So enjoy. So I heard you on a podcast. It's hard for me to remember which one it was, but it might have been Whitney's. And this was around the time that I was like binging on just any type of content that I could with eating disorders and podcasts and stuff like that. And I fell in love with what you were sharing, and it felt like you were speaking to my soul. And it's just, I love everything that you were talking about. So, um, I'd love to welcome you onto the podcast and get a little overview of what type of work you do, because your type of work is more detailed and in the nitty gritty, which is what I love.
Yeah, I appreciate that description because I definitely kind of dive in deep. And yeah, my work broadly has to do with um, eating disorders and patients who are not typically represented in eating disorder literature. So thinking kind of beyond the thin, white, cisgender, young female, that we see those stories in eating disorders a lot. But
Yeah.
there's a lot more folks that have these disorders. So, in particular, my work tends to overlap a lot with weight stigma because I look at the stories of people with higher body weight, um, and people too that have bodies that might be kind of more in the middle of the BMI spectrum, where people just kind of assume that, oh, this person, quote, looks so healthy, so how could they ever have an eating disorder? So, yeah, that's kind of an overview of my work. I use mixed methods, so I use things like surveys that rely on statistics to draw conclusions, and I also use interviews, stories, art, and that qualitative element. And I tend to, kind of like you said, it's definitely in the weeds, and it's pretty detail, and I tend to do deep dives into certain topics as opposed to
Hmm.
kind of bigger overviews.
Yeah. And that's what I love about your work. And I guess we're going to get into that, into all your creative modalities of healing. And we're definitely going to get into that because I'm all about integration and like how, like, it's awesome to like know these things and to know where we're at and to like have a clinical label, if you will, of like, why these behaviors came to be and everything. But integration is something really it's challenging. It's like, okay, how do we actually bring these things to life? But
Mm-hmm.
before we get into that, I'd love to kind of define atypical anorexia and define for the audience just different eating disorders that occur. And because on social media, I feel like body image and disordered eating and weight is talked about, but I don't feel like this realm of eating disorders is the
Mm-hmm.
part where you can have an eating disorder and not look like you are. So
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to hear your definition of atypical anorexia.
Yeah, so anorexia is a disease where people engage in self starvation. We refer to that as restriction, in that people restrict how much food that they eat or the calories that are in their food. And with anorexia, the majority, like between 50 and 60% in our prevalent studies of folks, also have behaviors that are um, perceived as what we call bulimic behaviors. So things like binging or purging. So um, with anorexia, you often see that you always see a restriction element, and you often see like a compulsive exercise element. And then, pretty frequently, you also see things like um, a uh, purging or binging behavior as well. And um, one thing that I think, so basically, and we also see cognitive symptoms. So things like obsessing about food or restricting, obsessing about exercise, obsessing about numbers and calories, sizes, weights, that type of thing. Um, and we also see kind of a disruption in terms of how people see their bodies. So some people see themselves as looking much larger than they are. And all of these eating disorders, whether it's anorexia or bulimia or some of the other ones that we'll talk about, um, also have an element where we call it overvaluation of weight and shape. So this idea that like how much a person weighs or what they look like takes up too much of their headspace. It's too
Right.
important to them. Now, how you define that, I think that gets really tricky because we're just surrounded in a cultural soup that really highly values weight and shape of individuals. And so it's a little bit tricky to say, okay, well, this is like normal dissatisfaction in our culture, but this is pathological dissatisfaction. But yeah, in the case of atypical anorexia, or in the case of anorexia, you see people, there's like an arbitrary cutoff, um, that the APA or the AMA come up with in terms of, a weight, a weight and height ratio that they define as too low.
Mm-hmm.
And that specific number is something that kind of changes often whenever a new version of the DSM or ICD-10 or ICD comes out. But generally, like, you could just think of it as like there's some cutoff for thinness that qualifies a person as having anorexia. And
Mm-hmm.
if you're above that arbitrary cutoff, you're considered, quote, atypical.
Right.
Um, and it's kind of, it's a little funny because it's actually more typical to be atypical than typical.
Right.
So it's more
Yeah.
common for people to be in that higher weight category. And so what we see is that, just as there's kind of natural diversity, if you were to kind of graph everybody's heights in a population, you'd see that it would form a beautiful bell curve, and so for an adult to be 4 feet tall, that would be more rare. So there's be kind of at one end of a curve. And for an adult to be, 7'2", that would also be pretty rare.
Mm.
And then there's a lot of, more common numbers in the middle. And weight is displayed similarly, where for someone to be very, very thin is pretty rare. And for someone to be very, very fat is pretty rare. But there's a lot of kind of people in the middle of that.
Mm-hmm.
And, one of the challenges with anything like this is we want to say, okay, well, here's this magic formula. You're this tall and your body structure is like this, so you should be able to weigh this amount of weight. And the reality is that even with all of our medical advances and technologies, we can make a pretty good guess, but at the end of the day it's a guess. And it's kind of our body that has the wisdom for where it's going to settle in terms of weight. And so some of
Right.
these arbitrary cutoffs are just not super useful.
Mm-hmm.
So, and anyway, I got a little off topic there describing eating disorders, but
No, no, no. That's very helpful.
essentially, atypical anorexia is anorexia, and the weight is a bit different. Um,
Like in an atypical body that people identify an anorexic body being in or
exactly.
something.
So,
Like,
I mean, it's almost more about our own stigma as people than it is
yeah.
about a different disease, and that's my belief as a researcher and clinician who has looked at this deeply, and many people in the field would, fight me on that.
I'm
But
sure.
that's that's what I can conclude from what I've learned so far.
Yeah, and I feel like maybe years ago, I mean, I've talked about this openly on the podcast, in like 2005, so this was quite some time ago. I was, put in inpatient for anorexia, but I didn't really know what was going on. I was so young that it didn't start in the typical way of, oh, I want to be skinny, or there was a little bit of that. There was a little bit of the body image stuff. There was a little bit of the, at the time, pro Anna stuff, which is absolutely fucking insane. I hope that doesn't even exist anymore. But yeah, and I feel like what you're saying is it's so true because everybody's body's different, right? And then so I like to compare it to like addiction, alcoholism or Narcotics Anonymous. Everybody's addiction is so different. Like I've gone to meetings, I've heard stories. Everybody's, everybody's phases and all the rounds and all the, you know, relapses and then, fallbacks or slip ups. It's different, it looks different, sounds different for everyone. And I feel like having numbers and rules on what makes you sick enough to get treatment, for example, is really, really disturbing. Um, and what you were saying, like with the cognitive symptoms, I'd love to get more deeper into that because I guess that's more of a pure way to analyze someone. Okay, yeah, like you definitely have an eating disorder, you know, like this is not normal.
Mhm.
Not having to base anything on weight or BMI or anything like that. So I'd love to get more into that. Like, what are some personality traits that you see firsthand in atypical anorexia, you know, clients and or just across the board in eating disorders? You mentioned a little bit of like, you know, obsessing about weight and numbers. And I just love to get more into that, like personality traits,
Mhm.
ways that we ways that we hold our energy, you
Mhm.
know, all that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say, just kind of in general, assessing based on kind of the cognitive symptoms that folks have and the behavioral symptoms is, from my point of view as a clinician, just a much better way of assessing how severe a person's disorder is. Another thing we look at too is functioning, which is kind of a weird word, but essentially, like, are you able to do the things in life that you want to do for whatever developmental stage of life that you're in? You know, if you're in elementary school, are you able to, you know, go to school and have a quality engagement with your peers and with your family members at home? Are you able to do activities that normal grade schoolers do? Kind of similarly for middle school and high school, are you taking steps towards autonomy, and what's your mental health like? You know, are you able to participate in life for a typical middle schooler or high schooler, or is your mental health kind of blocking that? And same thing kind of for adults. We look at, you know, is this person able to hold a job? Are they able to take care of their health? Can they have rewarding relationships, or is there something about food or body image, or weight, that is kind of blocking, you know, engagement in hobbies and work and kind of social activities? So those kind of three areas of like cognitive functioning, behaviors, and behaviors would be things like the time that you actually spend engaged in eating disorder behaviors. So restriction and purging and binging and compulsive exercise, and the repetitive and obsessive thought patterns, and how much time you spend beating yourself up. Um,
Right.
and you know, and then, you know, combined with those cognitive factors as well. um, I would say in general that there's a lot of different personality types within eating disorders, and a lot of different uh, like, we see a lot of different people that get these disorders for different reasons.
Right.
Often we talk about people who are either very highly controlled, with a very high kind of locus of control located in themselves. So these folks often are very self motivated, very disciplined,
Hmm.
perfectionistic, attentive to details. Um, this can also be kind of often partnered with compulsive and obsessive personality traits. We see a lot of overlap with obsessive compulsive disorder and eating disorders of this type. And there's this kind of, you know, desire to be controlled, and oftentimes in folks with those personality traits, you know, some of the emotions are a bit muted, or um, less in touch with, because there's kind of so much cognitive restraint happening. And then we also see some folks with eating disorders that kind of fall to the other end of um, things being like out of control or disrupted, where it's very easy to swing from one emotion to another. Often with these folks, there's kind of this impulsiveness, or um, uh, kind of swinging that happens
Hmm.
in terms of mood. We call it lability. These are often people that are more willing to take risks, which is a fantastic character trait in certain circumstances, and then a lot more dangerous in others.
Right.
So
Yeah, like being disciplined is great, but I feel like folks with eating disorders take it to the extreme.
yeah,
Exactly.
and I think in both of these kind of like these are kind of like archetypes of different struggles that a person may have, and people might identify with some of each. That's also not out of the question that you might present with some things where you are very much you know very over controlled, and then a few things where you might have kind of this impulsive or reckless kind of streak um, at certain times, or maybe when depression or anxiety are high. um,
Hmm.
but I think with both of these, oftentimes, especially in like the eating disorder mental health world, we might focus on all the negative things about the dangers of that, like how bad it is to be over controlled, and how hard it is to have good relationships, or how dangerous or damaging mood lability can be, or how terrible it is to be a risk taker, or that kind of thing. But um I hope from like a social work standpoint, a patient centered standpoint, a recovery standpoint, that we can also think about like what are some of the strengths or the gifts in those tendencies, and can we, for me, recovery is a lot about balance. Like, how do we bring those things into a little bit more perspective and a little bit more balance, so that instead of causing disruption and dysfunction and paralysis in a person's life, or damage or destruction, that those same characteristics could be maybe more finely tuned, so that we can take advantage of some of these like inherent strengths that people possess.
Yeah, I love that because like I'm really into Buddhism, and basically a big, limb and theory and teaching in Buddhism is how can I make myself more useful, like
Mm-hmm.
to my life, and just be more present. And I love this idea of like, okay, like there's this there's this energy, right, of the eating disorder, whether
Mm-hmm.
it's whatever kind of eating disorder it is, or if it's just, obsession with over exercise or whatever. There's this energy, and how can we channel it and extract like the 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 good parts of it, like you know the the disciplined and the just the energy of it. How can we alchemize that and transmute it into healing, and change that toxic behavior into something with that same energy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, if I think about, oftentimes, and, I don't know, I feel like maybe any therapist might feel like their patients are the most special or cool. Um,
Mhm.
but when I think about like some of the like sheer persistence and determination that folks with eating disorders have, and the amount of time, energy, and focus that they can spend, um,
It's
over.
unbelievable.
Yes, it's so
I
intense.
totally hear you.
And like, and this is like one of the biggest tragedies for me about eating disorders, is that it steals all this time, energy, and focus from some of the most talented and high capacity and talented people that I know. And
Hmm.
so and that, I think, is one of the saddest things, aside from like the personal destruction and the danger and the potential life loss and that kind of thing. Just this, the way that eating disorders can just like absorb so much time and potential. And part of, that's part of what keeps me so motivated in my work and in my personal life, to be working towards recovery, and how to make recovery accessible and engage, like anybody can engage in it. Like, what do we do so that we can like tap all this untapped potential and like
Hmm.
channel it in a different direction?
Right. Like, what's the practical way to somehow, because we could sit here all day, and or you can sit and talk to a therapist all day about where the eating disorder came to be, which is really important. You know, it's important to know the why, which maybe we can get into just a little bit. Like, you know, you mentioned control, like living in a controlling atmosphere. For me personally, my eating disorder came to be because of just family dynamics and
Mm-hmm.
changes, and I come from a dance background, so it
Mm-hmm.
was just a little bit of everything. It was a little
Mm-hmm.
bit of physical reality stuff. It was a little bit of at home stuff. Um, so I'd love to hear kind of why, like, why do eating disorders exist, you know? Like, I look at it as a way to cope, a way to channel
Mm-hmm.
trauma. I'd love to hear your aspect on that.
Yeah, such a big question. And when we think about eating disorders, we think about them in terms of biopsychosocial. I add spiritual illnesses, and
I
in
love
ter-
that.
yeah, in terms of the bio, we think often about like genetics and about heritability. So we think of things like, you know, twins with eating disorders are more likely to have, like if one twin has an eating disorder, the other twin is more likely to have it. If they're identical, it's more likely to
Hmm.
happen. So, and we also know that like having relatives in your family who have had eating disorders is also more highly correlated. Now, the extent to which there's a genetic component versus like inherited family traits and inherited family ways of being, that's where this all gets mushy. Um, and I would also add that there's like likely epigenetic, which has to do with like um, that influence of like culture and history on genetics that's also in play here. So, some of the patients that I interview that are indigenous can trace back through generations in their family's history how food and starvation or colonization has impacted their whole family and ancestors' way of being with food in their bodies.
Mm.
Um, and, we see this also in people who experience changes in like immigration status, moving from one part of the world to another, where there's um, big life altering changes for people and for peoples, for their ancestors, for families. That I don't think we think about some of those historical trauma factors enough in how we conceptualize eating disorder vulnerability. We often just think about the one person in their one nuclear family. um, but really, I think for these, especially for these biological forces, we have to also think about the histories of people and families and ancestors. So that's kind of the biological component. We also know that like certain biological things are more common for people to get eating disorders. For instance, fatter people are more likely to have eating disorders. That's not because they eat too much.
Hmm.
We actually in studies that look at like how much fatter people eat versus thinner people, there isn't actually like a statistical difference in amounts and frequencies, which makes me think that this has a lot more to do with like biodiversity than it does actual specific eating behaviors. But it could be that fat folks are at higher risk of eating disorders because of things like stress, like thinking about like the stress that people in higher weight bodies, especially in many Western cultures today, there's just more stress and body shame and more of a
Mm.
sense of responsibility to try and fix fat bodies than folks
Yeah.
with thin bodies.
And diet
Um,
culture,
yeah, absolutely. If fat people are
social
more
media.
likely to be told to go on diets, sometimes to be forced to go on diets. So yeah, I think those types of things all are in that biosphere. And then in terms of psycho, like we already talked about some of those kind of personality traits that make folks more vulnerable, and if you have a young, perfectionistic, very driven very black and white thinking child, they are likely more at risk for some of these eating disorders than children who are a little bit more easygoing or flexible in their thinking.
Hmm.
And so, like, messages like, you know, a certain food is quote bad, like for that child who has that rigid thinking and that perfectionism already inherent, they're going to receive that message about that food being quote bad very differently than somebody who has a lot more flexibility in their thinking, or who doesn't have as much obsession about being perfect or doing things the right way. So
Yeah. And I think like a kid, it's interesting because eating disorders are, more likely to develop in early childhood
mhm.
compared to drugs and alcohol. Like,
Yep.
it's easier to access an eating
Hmm.
disorder as a coping skill, as to deal with whatever's going on at home, or to deal with
Hmm.
whatever's going on at school, or to deal with whatever you're seeing on social media telling you that your body's too fat or whatever. um, and I think it's, a kid can hear something like that and take that and run with it and then
Hmm.
amplify it and then use that. And it's like, I guess, everybody's eating disorder is stemmed from a different uh, self-limiting belief, I guess. Like, it
Hmm.
can, it's a, the purpose of the eating disorder is different for everyone. Some people, it is simply for, I want to get skinny, I want to get thin. It could start with that. It could also start at home and feeling like nobody listens to you and nobody takes you seriously, or you're watching mom and dad fight, or your parents went through a divorce at a young age. You felt, there's so many different like archetypal stories of it happening. And
Hmm.
I don't know where I'm going here, but it's every case is so unique.
Yeah.
And I'd love to kind of dovetail into what it's like for someone to reach that point. You mentioned before, like, someone in a larger body, who maybe technically isn't eating more than someone in a smaller body, or they're starving themselves yet they're still in a larger body, which
Hmm.
I go to a lot of eating disorder meetings, and this seems to be a very common thread. Well, I'm not eating that much. I don't look sick, so people don't really consider me as having a problem. My family doesn't think I have a problem anymore because maybe I'm weight restored or maybe I
Hmm.
look healthy on the outside. What's going on psychologically when someone comes into your practice and they are eating in a way that is, very anorexic,
Hmm.
like they're not nourishing their body enough.
Hmm.
Um, what's your process just starting off with someone like that?
So I think a lot of it at the beginning, or at that point in time, has to do with decreasing that denial and that minimization of the eating disorder. Um, because there's often what's happening is this person, maybe they have been at a lower weight before and maybe their body quote looked sicker, or maybe it never has. Maybe they were a very high weight person and their body has just decreased to a point where now people finally stop giving them crap about their bodies. And there's this assumption of like, oh, you lost weight, this is such a wonderful healthy thing. And then sometimes where like the person has maybe lost a lot of weight but still is in.
So, I don't know about you guys, but when I was younger, I would use the crappiest makeup and I would cake on really cheap foundation on my face. I would use mascara that disintegrated off of my eyelashes. I would use things that just really did not accentuate my features and it would kind of make me look worse. So, I want to talk to you about Thrive Cosmetics. Thrive Cosmetics offers high performance, award winning products that are both vegan and cruelty free. I've been using Thrive Cosmetics for a while now, and I really love the Thrive Cosmetics Liquid Lash Extensions Mascara. It is the best mascara I've ever used, and I've used quite a bit mascara in my day because the older I get, I don't really want to wear a ton of makeup. All I wear usually is just mascara, some eyebrow, and this mascara is so good. I have people asking me like, are these your real eyelashes? But they don't make it look fake. Like fake eyelashes can be so just like intense to look at. This doesn't happen with the Thrive Cosmetics mascara. It's clump free, flake free, smudge free, and when you wash your face, it comes right off and it's really easy. I also love the Brilliant Eye Brightener. A lot of you guys on Instagram have asked me what I use. It's just you put it in the corner of your eyes and it just brightens your eyes up, and you can use it with a little bit of eyeshadow, but it really just you can also put it underneath your eye. It's really easy. It's a staple. Super easy to use. And I also use the Liquid Balm Lip Treatment. So nice for my lips. I get really chapped lips, and it's just really nice gloss. I think it also plumps your lips. At least that's how I feel when I put it on. And also their 3-in-1 cleanser is amazing. So Thrive is offering Vibe Within listeners 15% off of your purchase. So just go to thrivecosmetics.com/vibe. That's Thrive, CAUSEMETICS.com/vibe for 15% off. Thrivecosmetics.com/vibe.
Body that would be considered high weight or still discriminated against for being higher
Right.
weight.
And they're
Um,
still like starving themselves,
abs,
which is
yes,
it's so fucked up.
and
Like
people
so
don't believe
stressful for
it.
them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you know, like doctors, parents will think that kids are like sneaking candy or sneaking foods. Doctors will assume that patients are underreporting, that they're, saying that they eat a lot less than they do. And what I've found in my research, when I've actually asked patients, like, what are they actually eating, that sometimes it's really heartbreaking how little these folks are eating, and how there's it basically at that point, like, the doctors or parents or other people in your life kind of become the voice of your eating disorder. Like, they say like, oh, you're eating too much, or you must not know how much you're actually eating, or
Mhm.
if you were really starving yourself, you would look different. Like, and that's what the eating disorder says. Like,
Right.
the eating disorder says you're not sick enough, you haven't lost enough weight. Oh, you just ate that, that's terrible, it's way too much, your
Right.
body can't use it. Like, that's the eating disorder. And so when like friends and loved ones start sounding like the eating disorder, it's really challenging, because all of a sudden, in addition to like your own head, you're also having to fight this voice of like outside you, and this pressure outside you. And it can
Yeah.
make people like second guess every step of their recovery. It can lead to relapse, or it can lead to a person never even getting a chance to taste recovery. um,
Mhm.
and especially in the research is a little divided on this, but in the research that I've seen that looked at people that have had eating disorders for a while, and who are in kind of in quote atypical anorexia illness, often these folks have higher, or and by higher I mean worse cognitive symptoms than people in lower weight bodies. So oftentimes their obsession over weight and shape, their obsession over calories, over counting, their dissatisfaction, their overvaluation, like often those things are higher and worse. And that sense of internalized weight stigma, how badly they feel towards themselves and their body. And that, I mean, that makes sense to me because they're receiving feedback from society or doctors or parents that your body is too much and you do weigh too much.
Right.
And if you,
Yeah.
oh, go
Yeah.
ahead.
No, I was just going to say, like, and there's also people, I mean, to use me as an example, I guess, so I would probably classify myself in the category of atypical anorexia just because um, I do definitely still like find myself obsessing about what I'm eating or what I'm allowing myself to eat, but it's rooted in autoimmune disease and Hashimoto, and my metabolism is permanently damaged from the years of my eating disorders, which I think people don't realize. Um, once your body has been through so much, um, it's like we ask so much of our bodies,
Mm-hmm.
and now I'm getting older and I'm realizing, like, I really need to take care of the holistic part of my body in order to heal the things that my eating disorder triggered, if that makes any
Mm-hmm.
sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think people, younger folks, don't realize how the eating disorder can trigger all sorts of permanent damage, and
Mm-hmm.
then they might be sitting there like, oh well, 10 years ago it was so easy for me to lose weight. I'm eating the same amount, I'm eating like an anorexic person, but people are maintaining their weight, and
Mm-hmm.
that's also fucked up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
um what is this kind of how do you start helping people, um, physically and emotionally, kind of get out of that stuck
Mm-hmm.
spot of feeling so trapped in this control, wanting to control the body, wanting to either get smaller or just being like terrified to of gaining weight. How do you reach like a happy medium almost, or what do you do with them? How do you reframe their mind? How do you help them?
Yeah, you know, that's kind of the $1 million question in a lot of eating disorders research. But one of the things that I would say is that we can't fix people's disordered minds as long as their bodies are starved. And in the same way, when we have a person who's presenting with a lot of thinness and they're starved, with larger people too that are starving, like we have we have to, like, food is medicine, right? Like, and
Hmm.
until, like, as long as we're in that deprived state, um food is going to continue to be the biggest thing. It's We're going to obsess about it. We're going to lose and spend so much time thinking about our body and calories and weight or macros, whatever it is, whatever your thing is with food. Like, we will lose ourselves in it, especially if we continue to try and fix it with a starving mind. And so, one of the first things, which is so hard, and one of the things that makes eating disorder recovery such a challenge, is that in the midst of all of that mental anguish and obsession, like, the first step towards healing is getting nourished.
Right.
And that's, and I can't overstate that enough. And oftentimes, if we see people and, like, it looks like their bodies are like, there's maybe they're back to where they were prior to their eating disorder or something, or they're starting to look or seem more like themselves, but their mind is still a battlefield and it's still obsessed. Oftentimes I wonder, like, we might have a little bit more recovery to go physically, and
Yeah.
maybe they're, especially for people who've been in an eating disorder for a long time, who have maybe many years of restriction, or for people that were had an eating disorder during periods of, like, growth. like as an adolescent or as a child, even into kind of the young adult years when your body is still kind of settling into its more mature
Yeah.
form. Like,
That was me. Yeah.
yeah, you might not know, we might not know what a health, like what your body is normally, just because we've
Right.
never seen you nourished.
Oh my God. That really
So,
speaks to me
yeah.
because I mean, I was 15 years old. I mean,
Hmm.
and I think going through puberty was definitely something that triggered me to look at my body in a new way. I was like, oh, I don't feel the same. I
Hmm.
don't feel good. Nobody's, you know, nobody's showing me what a healthy body image looks like.
Hmm.
And I didn't like the way that I felt with this weight gain, but I didn't know I didn't know why I felt. I didn't have the vocabulary or the language. And then my obsession with like exercising, because I was an active kid, but I think I started to feel that control and that channeling of my self-esteem and family stuff, um, so easily and effortlessly channeling into this eating disorder that was developing, and then it just spirals, and then
Yeah.
you don't even realize what's going on. The eating disorder takes a new shape. It you know Everybody's story is different, but I think this concept of nourishing, like, okay, step one, how can we nourish our bodies in a deeper way, whatever that means to you. Because a lot of treatment facilities, I've heard horror stories about um, treatment facilities like saying you have to eat this kind of food or you have to eat that kind of food. And I'm all about intuitive eating. I love that concept, but for people like me who are, they have some, I would say, autoimmune orthorexic tendencies,
Hmm.
because all of these food fears, all of these, and it's, biological too. I think eating disorders will fuck up your metabolism, your digestion. I've
Hmm.
heard so many stories of people, yeah, like I started nourishing myself and my stomach would blow up like a balloon.
Hmm.
So it's like a paradox, like you're trying to heal, you're trying to recover, you're trying to nourish, but your body's, fighting back, and all of these symptoms can occur, um, especially for folks who have been restricting for a long period of time, like you said.
Hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. And that's, aside from just kind of like the kind of acute shifts that we get in terms of fluid shifts when we go from restricting to starting to eat again, um, eh, there is this whole, your body when it's starved, whether it's starved in a thin body or it's starved in a fat body, it has so many things that shut down in that process of not getting enough nutrients, and oftentimes, yeah, I don't know, people have this like idea that like, if you stop eating, your body can, if you stop eating and you're fat, your body can just like magically transform the fat into like everything that it needs in order to be a healthy body. And the reality is like it can't do that. Like it's not
Right.
just, like, and when it does transform, different things into other things, it creates byproducts biologically that then drain through your kidneys, drain through your liver, which is part of the reason why we see people with kidney and liver failure who are starving,
Hmm.
and like all of that puts stress on a body, and so we have this kind of idea like, oh, well, if I need energy, I'll just find it from somewhere else. Well, yeah, but we borrow it from other important functions. And, when you don't have the things that you need for long enough, there can be permanent changes that happen to your gut flora, to your digestive system. Um,
Exactly.
and, and that can happen, and this is what's, mind boggling to me. Like, as physicians and doctors and nurses, like they know that this can happen at any size, but it's like they don't know that it can happen at any size. um, so yeah,
Right.
we see it happen all the time. Dr. Gaudiani in her book, Sick Enough, talks about like the amazingly creative strategies that a body uses to adapt to starvation is so cool that it like keeps some of us alive for a little while, but there's so many consequences that come with it. And um, we talk in eating disorder recovery, we talk about a lot about regaining body trust. Like, how do we, essentially in our eating disorders, we cause ourselves and our body tremendous trauma. It's not a non-violent peaceful thing to starve, like it's deliberately causing harm to our bodies. And I don't say that to shame us, I just say that to like recognize that,
Right.
this is, in the same way that people who are, forcibly starved in, situations where that happens, like it's an act of violence against our body, and it takes
Yeah.
a long time for our bodies to heal from whatever that initial thing is. And some people's bodies don't, like some people, and this is why, every body reacts differently to starvation. And some bodies are, quote, really good at being starved. And I hope you hear my sarcasm in that, um, because
Yeah.
what I mean is that like they can put up with a lot of crap for a long time, but
Right.
then all of these other things are sacrificed along the way: gut function, liver,
Mhm.
kidney function, heart function, reproductive function. There's all these things that
Yeah.
are sacrificed. And
And the
so,
psychoactive effect too
yes, yeah,
of feeling depressed, feeling anxious, feeling withdrawn, feeling angry,
easily
bitter.
overwhelmed,
Yeah.
regressing developmentally, starting to act, years or stages younger than you are, because like
Mm.
your body cannot handle the maturity that you're at. Um,
Yeah, wow, that that piece right there actually really resonates with me, and I'm not proud of that at all. But I've been doing a lot of, trauma healing work with my
mhm,
therapist and on my own, and I consciously know that my adolescent part of myself, 15-year-old Gab, she's still very, very loud, and she's like running the show sometimes. And she was, maybe the volume of her was lowered for a little while, like when I was in college and I was sleeping around and I was doing drugs and the eating disorder lowered. But now that I'm sober, that I'm, healing trauma, I'm clean. It's interesting because just like, you know, people who use drugs, one person can be using a little bit of drugs and it can totally fuck their world up. They can, they can spiral into a deep dark depression and just get into this crazy place. And then some people can do a lot of drugs and function like a normal person, which is crazy. Same
mhm,
thing with eating disorders. Like it's interesting because now that I'm sober, that I've been sober for like over a year, that's when little eating disorder remnants started to get
mhm,
louder. And
mhm,
that's what people might be dealing with as well. Because I think a lot of the community that listens to this podcast is sober curious,
mhm,
um, and is I get a lot of DMs and messages from people. I'm healing trauma. I'm healing sexual assault. I'm healing family trauma. And I think that when you're doing that work with a sober mind, the mind will try to latch
mhm,
on to anything that can help you cope,
mhm,
anything at all.
mhm,
Disordered eating, exercise. And I think now in this day and age of everyone being so like, well, I won't say everyone, but there's a lot of people in this community who are aware of, their wounds. And it, these eating disorders and disordered eating in general is becoming more, prominent in our culture
mhm.
because everyone's just trying to cope.
Yeah, especially with COVID right now, and with just, which is essentially the way I'm conceptualizing it right now is like a sustained long-term acute trauma,
Hmm.
whether that's something that is um, that you see how it's you kind of like impacting you a lot in any given point in time. But I mean, it has changed everything about how we live and communicate and the kind of relationships and supports that we have. And those things for many of us changed in an instant, and coupled with the uncertainty of when things go back to normal, which, for at least for those of us in America, like we are very far from normal.
Yeah.
And that stressor, that trauma, that uncertainty, all of those are things that, eating disorders and other coping mechanisms like substance use, like that's where those things thrive, you know.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, no, I I
Yeah.
have a lot of interest in eating disorders when they co-occur with substance use, just
Yeah.
personally and professionally. So yeah.
Well, I could be your guinea pig at any time. You can pick my brain at any time because I mean, I've not to brag, but I have
Yeah.
both worlds. Um, I think it's like so today I was listening to a podcast and it was interesting what they were saying to get more into like the spiritual
Hmm.
component. I think like what we're trying to get at here is like, okay, how can we like how can someone recover? How can someone get out of that? I hate my body, I'm going to starve myself, or I'm just going to, in that cycle, in that toxic cycle. And I think obviously awareness is the first step as well, like cognitively understanding, okay, this is not normal and I don't deserve this.
Hmm.
And like having those conversations with yourself, I guess, like when I do that with myself, like, okay, this is not normal. um I don't need to take this out on my body.
Hmm.
um Things like that, and just like talking it in ways like that and journaling. But I was listening to this podcast and they were saying, we don't choose our body when we come down in this lifetime. We
Hmm.
don't choose our hair color, we don't choose the color of our skin.
Hmm.
So instead of wasting so much time and energy in trying to change our body, in a more extreme way, other than going to the gym is great, wanting to be healthy is great, but when you get past that point and it becomes obsession with changing the body and feeling like shit and it ruling your life, they were saying, maybe the body that you were given is supposed to be the vessel that you have in order to heal people, in order to help people, because certain people will resonate with you, and the body that you're given will resonate with certain people when they see your body.
Hmm. That is that is such a deeply profound thought, um, and so important. I I think to answer this question, I'm going to have to be go more towards personal than academic right now,
Yeah, please.
um, because I don't think the science has a good answer for us yet. like,
Yeah.
I think, like in stories, first of all, in studies of recovery, like people use all different kinds of definitions, and like so many of them really don't resonate for me, because like whether or not a person has a certain BMI or like menstruates, like that, that's not what I'm concerned about when I'm concerned about recovery. What I want to know is like, how are you living with you? How are you inhabiting your body, and how much peace do you have? And
Yeah.
beyond just like that neutral state, like how are you living and thriving and doing what you were meant to do, whatever that thing is? And and that, like, we can't tell just by like measuring some hormones and putting a person on a scale, and so I think what I don't know. I think a lot about body image distortion, about our relationships with our body. And, I think when I started kind of a recovery journey, there was this kind of promise of like, okay, well, right now, like you look in the mirror and, your point of view is all messed up. And, it's like you're staring in a mirror and it's crooked and you're just seeing things and they're distorted. But eventually in recovery, like that frame is going to straighten out and you're going to see yourself as you really are and how beautiful you are. And, like you'll finally be able to appreciate your body and all of its unique beauty, blah, blah, blah.
Mhm.
And that for me hasn't ever happened. And at one point in time I was like, like I would be happy if, like, I mean, I don't even have to love my body. I'd be happy if I just didn't want to like vomit every time I see my body, like, you
For
know
real, like, yeah. I mean, there's definitely people listening to this who are in that headspace, you know?
yeah, like I like even neutrality, like just like looking in the mirror and being like, huh, like
Yeah.
that seemed like a flippin' pipe dream to me, and I would say in like many ways, those are still pipe dreams, but part of how I've experienced recovery is that like it just doesn't flippin' matter as much anymore. Like there was a time in my life, and a long, extended, like years, probably even a decade, where like the thought of my body being actually physically fat, by what our society considers fat, um, like I would think in my head I would rather die than be fat. Like that was a literal like thought. It was a conscious choice. When I engaged in my eating disorder, it was a choice that I made of like,
Mhm.
people would say like this could kill you and I'd be like, yep, you know but at some point I got enough recovery that I no longer valued my life so little that
Yeah.
fatness was that much of a threat, and now, you can't see me, you don't necessarily know what my body looks like, but like I am larger than I've ever been in my life, um, and it also kind of matters the least, and
Wow.
so it's,
I love that.
it's not something I'm happy about. It's not something that I'm like, I don't look in the mirror and think like, oh, I look good. I'm not one of those like beautiful recovery butterfly people that's like,
Yeah.
I bloomed into this beautiful being. It's like, no, like I kind of bloomed into my own worst nightmare, something that I thought I would kill myself over. But now I have like, my life is so valuable that like I don't want to die.
There's just, like, more importance
Yeah,
and substance in your life, like, that is just, like, so beautiful to hear,
so
and
many more important
yeah,
things.
and when I see all those accounts, God bless them, like, really just, like, putting out that fat positivity, which is needed in this culture.
Absolutely.
Don't get me wrong, but I don't see myself as ever being like that either. Um, I'm obviously in a bigger body than I was when I was anorexic, and it's hard.
Hmm.
It's hard because the mind is so fucked up and the mind will trick you. Oh, well, you felt so good at that weight. Like, no, you didn't, you know? Um, like, no, you didn't.
Like,
Physically, emotionally, no, you didn't. And like,
you
that's the
cut yourself because
paradox.
you hated yourself so much. Like,
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was just about to say, like, eating disorders, the paradox of them is, okay, so, you use these coping skills, you starve yourself, you binge, you purge, you exercise, whatever your thing is, you do that to feel better, and then those same behaviors are actually making you feel worse, and it's actually fucking up your life, and it's actually
hmm.
making you obsess and taking you away from what good you do have in your life. And I guess to like bring it full circle, like what we were talking about earlier, what these self-limiting beliefs and these ideas that like maybe a parent implanted, or
Mm-hmm.
a teacher or a comment or something that spiraled you. It could be at any age. Um, what helped me recently is by like going back and kind of like internally
Mm.
reprogramming that
Uh-huh.
experience, because mine started when I was in dance, and I was really young. I was like, 8, 9, 10, 11 years old, and I would compare my short, little, stubby, chubby body to these tall, skinny, lanky, beautiful girls, and that's where it started.
Mm-hmm.
So, what I tried to do, and this does take work, it does take imagination, it does take, you know, a radical kind of approach, but like trying to go back and tend to that little girl and
Mm-hmm.
talk to her and like visualize, things going in a different way, and not being so sad with how I looked, and reprogramming like what teachers would say, and
Mm-hmm.
those little experiences and those moments of your childhood or your adolescence that you can kind of pinpoint. Okay, maybe that's where something happened there, and that's where part of the eating disorder was
Mm-hmm.
seated. Like going in and journaling about it and just visualizing something different happening, that's helped me a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, I have this photo from when I was in third grade. And it was like one of those things, how like in third grade, like I don't know if your school did this, but in my class, like everybody got to be like student of the week once. um
Yeah.
and
Student of the day. Yeah.
yeah, you'd have like your picture put in a little thing, and like you got to bring some show and tell or something. I don't know what I was, but um they took our pictures for this at school, and I have this picture of me like 8 years old, and I was a pretty thin kid. And eight is also like right when like the very, very first hints of puberty were starting for me.
Hmm.
And like it's like the early 90s. I'm wearing this like one piece suit that's like magenta and turquoise in different blocked patterns of like a shorts. It's like connected. It's like a shorts
Amazing.
and skirt and like shirt all in one.
I love
And
it.
oh man, it's and like my mom had wanted to do like a cool, cute haircut. So I have like this haircut, and so I kind of look like a boy. I'm missing my teeth.
That
I'm
it's just like the awkward
Oh
the
my god.
awkward phase. The
Yeah,
most awkward of our lives, pretty much.
exactly. And like I remember getting this back like at the end of the year. They give you your student of the week picture, and like I had so much shame around it that I like
Oh,
hid it, and didn't like show my parents, didn't show anyone, and just because I was so disgusted, and I had that much like loathing as a 7, 8 year old. And
man. Oh my God.
it's like I look at that now, and like now I look at it and I'm like, man, I'm just like a knobbly kneed, weird looking kid that's 7 with no teeth, and like this is the stage of life that people
Yeah.
go through, right? And it's so much more. Like now looking back, I can have compassion for her, and be like, hey, like that's a hard time to be a kid, man. Like,
Yeah.
but like all of this like shame that I had for my body, it wasn't my shame. It was honestly, it was other people's shame. It was like shame of trauma and shame of diet culture and stuff like that. And yeah, I think that I carried that picture like around in a journal for, I want to say, like the whole first year of my recovery.
Yeah.
And just reminding myself like I have to give love to this little girl who has so much disgust with herself, and now I can look at that little body and be like, man, like if I had a child, my son is 5 now, and like I want to give him so much love around his body, whatever it ends up looking like, that those voices that try and sneak in from our culture or from other people, that they just can't penetrate. That's my
Yeah.
hope,
Yeah. I think that's a beautiful practice and like practical way of recovering as well as the
Mm-hmm.
nourishment is, I do have a photo of myself as well when I was in that awkward phase with crooked teeth and
Mm-hmm.
glasses, and that's when my eating disorder, I think, started to seed, in dance and everything. And I look at that photo as well, and I try to reparent that little
Mm-hmm.
girl.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure everybody has heard this term of reparenting, and but like really truly like we can learn about it, we can talk about it, but like it when it comes to time to actually do the thing and recover, reparenting is very real, and it's a daily practice, and it's a daily choice to constantly try to reprogram and reparent
Mm-hmm.
those beliefs, that weren't ours, that those beliefs about our body weren't ours.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really, it's been a practice that I've been
Mm-hmm.
enjoying, even though it's kind of hard. And then also something that's been helping me as well, which I'm sure you'll resonate with, is by finding people, 'cause since social media is such a prominent part of life, by doing a clean out and then finding people who have more so the body that you have, or more curvy, or the kind of body that you'll probably have when you're fully weight restored, if you are underweight, or someone who is in the same realm as you, and you look at them and you're like, wow, I love their body. Like they're super hot, or
Mm-hmm.
they're super attractive to me. Like I follow a bunch of women who have larger bodies than me, and when I see them and their confidence, I'm like, "Oh shit, like they have a big butt and big thighs. Like I would look good with that too, you know?"
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, it's like a constant reframe, and like any little ways that
Mm-hmm.
we can start to reprogram those thoughts. It sounds silly like using social media, but like for real, like what tools can we use to integrate? It's going to look and feel different for everyone, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it in terms of like the norms that we're set up to see, even things like let's take body weight out of it and just think about gender for a hot minute. Like if you think about like how many like male athletes do you see on a day on TV? How many like male sports teams have you seen? How many like of our presidents and vice presidents and governors have been males? Like if we think about just like how overpowering that message of like male norms is, and how
Yeah.
unusual it is for us, like we all probably know, a few female athletes or something, but like it's just like we're taught because of society to expect a male norm, and
Yeah.
no matter what, like no matter how like radical we are, no matter how awesome we are, like we have this internalized sense of like what competence looks like and what leadership looks like, and it has a lot of these kind of quote male uh characteristics or what have you. And same thing with whiteness, how whiteness is normed,
Yeah.
and if we think about like thinness is also normed, like in the same way that we are just like bombarded by like thin pretty white people.
Influencers.
Yeah, we gotta we have to combat that somehow, and social media is a great way of doing that, and honestly just being exposed to something more makes you, sorry for my little puppy.
No, you're fine. My dog's been barking too.
um but just being exposed makes you like something more, like
Yeah.
and like maybe the first time that you see like a truly beautifully fat woman with her belly out, like maybe the first 1,000 times that you see that, you have an internal reaction of like of fear or some other kind of like questioning or confusion or whatever, but it can get to the point where you like are seeing these other bodies. There's an artist called Shug, and their art, they have a whole series called Bodies Like Oceans, and it compares fat bodies to like how they move with water, and they photograph fat folks in water, kind of very mermaid looking.
Oh,
um,
cool. I
and
like that.
other artwork where they photograph fat folks along like the rock formations of like Arizona, and you can just see like this body is just from the earth the way other bodies are from the earth, and
Yeah.
things like that, have been to just see in myself, like to be able to recognize my own weight stigma and how I have those internal reactions, and then to see how it can change, that it doesn't always have to be this like feeling of fear or disgust, but like first we have to be honest with ourselves that that feeling of fear or disgust is there, even if we
Yeah.
don't want it. We don't want to admit it. We think it makes us bad people. It just makes us people that grew up at this point in time in our culture. But we
Right.
do have choices over like whether or not we sit and stew in that, or whether or not we change what's around us.
Right. And like make a choice. Okay, I want to enjoy my life. Even if I don't technically love my body at
Hmm.
this weight, we still deserve to enjoy life
Hmm.
and connect to what is going well and
Yeah.
what is working and what does feel good and what does bring us joy. And I think something that came up when you were explaining all that is that recovery is going to take a while. Whether it's from drugs, alcohol, like you see addicts that go to these meetings, right? I mean, they've been sober for what, 30 years, or some of them who've been sober for 40 years and they're still going to meetings. The reason that is because they're still struggling, and
Hmm.
because recovery for them is a lifelong practice. It's like
Hmm.
a yoga practice, you
Hmm.
know? And like for me, it's like, well, the eating disorder for me, what it's been in my life for 15 years in different shapes and different forms, hasn't been as intense um these last several years, thankfully. But it takes time to recover from anything, and
Hmm.
especially a psychological disease or illness. And I think what they say about breakups too is like time can only heal. Like it's
Hmm.
time's the only thing it can heal, and it's like time and time again, each day, each week, each month, that you commit to recovering and doing these practices and doing little things each day to resculpt those fucked up
Hmm.
beliefs that were kind of just drilled into your head without even wanting them. Just doing those little things each day and trying to enjoy life in any way that you can, that will, for me at least, lower the volume of the eating disorder.
Absolutely. And I think it's eh, like we can't think about it as like there's no switch, right? Like, but there, I think there are moments where you have, I call them glimpses. I don't, that's just a word that I came up with, but like there are these like glimpses that I get where I'll
I
have
love
it
that.
and I'll be like, my God, like this is different than it used to be,
Yeah.
and like you have that like inner knowing of like this, I just had a glimpse, and maybe it's really fast, maybe
Yeah.
it's just like you just catch like the tiniest glimpse of yourself in the mirror and you're like, okay, or maybe it's, that you realize someday that like, you just ate something that you never can eat without obsessing in your head, and you're just cool about it. You just
Right.
like you didn't worry about it, and then of course after you ate it then you worried about it, but like but you realize like, oh, like this is different than it used to be.
Those are huge victories. Like,
Yeah.
they seem small, but they're huge. And, like, yeah, I love that. Like, those little glimpses of, like, "Oh, like, I'm actually really happy right now." And
Mhm.
And sometimes the eating disorder or the addiction or whatever it is, the depression will try to suck you away right away from those moments, you know,
Mm-hmm.
but and make you think about your trauma or this or that or all the things that aren't working out. But if we can continue to shift and pivot
Mm-hmm.
and focus on, okay, I'm going to be aware this thought, you know, this thought about my body is stemming from childhood and it's not mine, and just that awareness. And like what you said earlier, you know, like looking at a fat body and being disgusted the first thousand times, um, deepening those neural pathways is the only thing that's gonna help, you know, someone actually get out of the mental illness, is like continuing to um unbrainwash yourself, you know, like from these ways of thinking, and deepening those grooves in the brain to think in a different way. It takes time.
Absolutely. And it's that, like, I think that's where the choice in our recovery comes in, is that we have choices about like how we spend some of our time. And we don't always have choices once we're in it, like for those of us that, you know, bend a little bit towards that OCD side of the spectrum.
Mm.
Sometimes when we get started, it could take us a minute to get out. Um,
I'm raising my
but
hand right now because that's me.
me too, you know. But we do have some of those, like, how am I going to spend my time? And like when I do have those choice moments, like, what do I decide to do? And
Right. Like, would I rather obsess about, like, how thick my thighs feel, or would I rather, like, do something productive, hang out with
Mhm,
my mom, watch a movie, hang out with my cats, do
mhm,
art? Like what's more important, you know? And I think the older we get, like what you were saying earlier, which I loved, you're like, it just doesn't matter anymore. Like, it just doesn't matter as much anymore.
mhm.
I think that's like a beautiful awareness thought to hold on to. Like, just keep going. Like, it doesn't it doesn't really matter. Like, yes, our bodies do matter, but like only to a certain extent. Like, we should all be healthy, but like the you know your the weight on your thighs or on your belly, it shouldn't matter that much. And just to try to stay with that thought will help too.
Yeah, and to think too that, like, sometimes, it's, and I think this gets back to some of the chronic illness stuff that you talked about. Like, sometimes we don't even have a choice over our health. We don't, like our bodies just like are the way they are, and they either, have health or don't, or they have disabilities or they don't, or they, have these obsessive neural pathways or they don't. But it's like, like how do we live into a right, ethical, compassionate way for ourselves and for others? That's a lot where I come back to, like, yeah, maybe I'm definitely healthier today than I was 15 years ago. And I'm not what people would call necessarily a picture of health either, but like compared to like where I've been, like I'm
Yeah.
grateful. And you know
Yeah.
just like.
I love that, like, comparing,
Mhm.
like, I actually did this, in therapy, like, I know that we're getting up to the hour, so if you have to dip, just let me know, but, um, I I wrote like a list of things that I used to do at the peak of my eating disorder, and things I don't do, and things that, you know, I do now that are healthier. And, you know, like, I don't purge, I don't do
Mhm.
these things. And it's like, wow, like, if we could really sit down with ourselves. And for anyone who's listening right now, if you're feeling like you're stuck and you're feeling like you're just defeated, like, seriously write down a list of like things that you did that were super toxic for your body and your mind.
Mhm.
And you'll quickly realize that your progress is happening. It's just not happening as fast as you want it to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I really, really enjoyed this conversation. I feel like I could talk to you for a really long time, and I'd love to have you back on the podcast eventually. Um, and I'd love to for you to let everybody know, like, where they can find you if anybody is struggling, if they need resources, anywhere that they could find you, or any last bit of anything that you'd like to share.
Yeah, I mean, if people want to, so I'm like, don't have a website yet, but people can find me on like Facebook, or you can email me, Erin.
It's funny because when I heard your podcast episode, I was like, "Shit, how am I gonna find her?" And I like re-listened to the episode, and I was like, "What? Like, how do I forget how I found you? But I found you, and I found your email. Like, it took me a little while, but I was like, I want this woman on my podcast. Like, I need to talk to her." So I made it happen.
Yeah, yeah. I'm at the University of Denver now, so you can look me up there, or I'm just erin.harrop@du.edu. Um, so yeah, that's probably the best way. I am not on top of my online presence the way I should be.
No, it's cool. When I hear someone that I really just jive with, I'm like, I will find them.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah, if there's any kind of last advice or just anything on your mind that you'd like to leave people with who are struggling, I'd love to hear that.
Um, I think for me, it's that like our eating disorders lie, and they tell us that a good life isn't possible for us, or it's not possible for us in a certain body. And I'm just like, I'm so glad that like that's not the end of the story, and that life does get better. It's a corny, like, it gets better, but it's true, and yeah, I haven't blossomed into a beautiful recovery butterfly yet, but like I have come to a place in my life where like what I have now in the body that I thought I would hate, is so valuable and so important and so life-giving. And it, like for me, the greatest part is that it gives me the chance to positively impact other people, and that's something that I've wanted my entire life, and I've only been able to find that in, the health and the body and the fat that I have now, and if
Yeah.
I was still in my eating disorder, I wouldn't have that. I wouldn't have it. So,
Yeah, and you're helping people through your vessel, which is your
yeah,
body, which
yeah.
is, you know,
I'm
to get
taking that with
spiritual.
me. I love that. Like that this is the
Yeah.
vessel you were given. And honestly, if I'd been given a thinner vessel, there are people that I wouldn't be able to reach.
You're right. People resonate with you in the body that you have because they're in that same journey, perhaps,
Hmm.
or, it's just, it's something to think about for sure. And I'd love to have you back on the podcast at some point. That would be great.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me today.
Yeah.